Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we have a special episode with MLA member Josh celebrating his victory lap, going about your victory lap based off reaching Grandmaster for the first time ever. Thanks for joining me today, Josh.
Thanks for having me, Curtis, and appreciate all the advice and feedback that got me to this point. So thank you.
So the reason I wanted to interview you, Josh, is not only because of your spectacular result, but also you really articulated quite well what specifically worked. And I think a lot of people sometimes struggle to articulate why they actually get the result they do. And you're a very smart man yourself and very articulate. So I thought it'd be good to have you on and share with the broader community, what worked, what allowed you to get results, and how did you overcome some of the pitfalls, knowing that you did definitely have your fair share of stage 4 issues. So I guess where it would make sense to start is just taking a look here at your OPGG. Now, I just actually clicked here on this tier graph. At the beginning of this year, you're at the bottom of Diamond, essentially. And as we can see here, you've had a beautiful steady climb all the way up for the most part, reaching now in late September, 557 LP in Grandmaster on the NA server. You are now the highest ranked Vel'Koz player in NA,
And
or just NA, right? Because ASAP would be in EU, right?
Azeb's king, so
Yeah. Which is a remarkable achievement. I mean, not exactly an easy champion, especially in mid lane to climb with. And if we take a look at, obviously you're playing predominantly mid. I know ASAP has been very vocal about playing Vel'Koz bot and probably even being a little bit easier to execute in bot. So, obviously you're killing it, 59% win rate, good sample size of games, remarkable achievement. And I want to just start with maybe start with where were you, over the past year? So you've been in the MLA for about a year now. Where did you start? And maybe give us a rough overview of how you got here and where did you start from?
definitely. So when I first joined the MLA, I was basically barely diamond. I was diamond 4 right at the start, and when I had my first review, I think you'll get a chuckle out of this. That my first review was with Tim, and he had mentioned that my OPGG was probably the worst one he's ever seen. And as you know, he's coached quite a few clients. So I had I was a jack of all trades, master of none, where I was playing every single champion under the sun that you could imagine, and of course not having much success.
We
So
can see here, right, on the
yeah,
OPG. This
exactly,
was at the beginning,
exactly.
at the beginning of last year. You had it was a hodgepodge of a bunch of different champions. Later on, you also played a lot of different champions: Syndra,
Yep.
Vel'Koz, Yone, Seraphine, Ezreal, and then even later on in that year as well, you still played a lot of champions. You played Abessa, Vel'Koz, Syndra, Victor, Galio, Ryze, Smolder, Seraphine. The list goes on. You played a lot of different champions here. So I I definitely got a chuckle out of that, saying, yeah, your champion pool was a bit of a mess.
Yeah, and you can see that reflected in the tier graph because, early on in my journey in 2025, I was still kind of getting influenced by the voices, the Lil Dobby videos of the fun new pick. I'm sorry to NA Solo Queue. When those videos come out, I was griefing your games. I reform now. I play only my core champions. But yeah, you can see that. So, and one of the things that really helped me is chant mastery, which I didn't really appreciate when I first joined the MLA and when I was struggling to climb. So that was a big thing for me. That was a big driver in my success. Another thing I struggled with as well was my relationship with the game, where I like to think I'm fairly resilient to adversity in general outside of the game, but external factors, not really giving myself any risk mitigants or a framework to navigate the game and enjoy my process because we lose roughly 50% of our games. We don't want to be miserable half of the time. I would get tilted and I would sort of have this cascading effect where I'd play bad under my standard of play, I'd get tilted, and then I would just sort of get tilted and play worse, and it just became a pretty bad cycle. I was a very, very volatile player where I could fluctuate maybe 400, 500 LP in a short period of time without a real disciplined framework, which I'm thankful for the MLA and instilling some of those best practices.
So let's start with champion mastery. It's something that's a term that's thrown around a lot. A lot of people, at this stage probably think of it as like a buzzword. Champ mastery. Yeah, I can play my champion. Obviously you doubled down in Vel'Koz. Before that, you had mains before. What now in hindsight, knowing that you've gone deep down that Vel'Koz journey, what do you think prevented you from maybe internalizing the whole idea of champion mastery? And what was some of the things that now in hindsight, it's like, huh, that actually makes a lot of sense. How champion mastery genuinely helps you on your journey.
Yeah, I would say it's probably a mixture of ego and ignorance, just to be blunt,
Mm,
where you think you can pull out a quote unquote simple champ and perform and win games, and you might win one or two games on a counter pick, but that's not long term success. That's not sustainable. It's short term gratification, really, when you think about it. And then in terms of the ignorance piece, as I've started to climb in hindsight, now it's so clear to me. But really, champion mastery, in my opinion, is so important because when you see some of these really high elo players, challenger players, etc., what they're doing on their champions, I didn't even know those limits were possible. And I've been playing the game forever. I was a grinder. I spammed games. Some of the things you see these players pull off on their champions with that champ mastery, I mean, it's unbelievable. Just to give one anecdote, recently I had the pleasure or displeasure, you could argue, of playing against a really good, a Vex player, 1,000 LP, 75% win rate. And normally that's a matchup. I don't think I've ever lost Vel'Koz versus Vex ever. And this guy, I mean, I was down 40 CS at 15. He was just playing amazing, all because of champ mastery. And so really, just to come back to the final point, champ mastery, it's really what's holding people back because in those pivotal moments, 26 minutes in the game, if you mess up a combo, it's hard to quantify that. And you may not even
mm.
remember it if you're not reviewing your games, but like those pivotal moments, knowing to position, the potential to flank, not having your mental stack overwhelmed because you understand your champion and the limits. I mean, it really allows you to pull out from a 45% win rate maybe to 55. It really does make a difference.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's very difficult to quantify champion mastery, isn't it? Because it's not necessarily about what you do. Sometimes it's even about what you don't do, or it's even just like, okay, you have the baseline structure, but if you had the champion mastery, you'd be able to squeeze out an additional,
Mm-hmm.
little thing that you never would have thought about. I think that's the tricky thing. It's the you don't know what you don't know. Right. And I think
Definitely.
you're right. It does come from ego, right? In the sense that I think it's a combination of ego, but also disrespect for the levels of the game, right? The levels that there are in the game. Um, okay, so I want to now go through a few of your points. So you obviously, in the Midland Academy, you reached GM and you shared with the community a few things. So obviously we've touched on a lot about champion mastery. You mentioned here a random cannon top. So you want to maybe kind of elaborate on the story here?
Yeah, definitely. And if this Kenan's watching, I don't remember your username. It's in Korean letters, but reach out to me. I'll give you RP. But yeah, this Kenan top laner, he really inspired me. This is when I was, low masters, but still kind of, I reached my new baseline and still kind of trying to learn the game from scratch again, really. And this Kenan top laner, we were losing the game. It was most likely going to be a loss, but he decided to sack a wave of his, make a high tempo play in bot lane, completely flipped the game on its head, and we ended up winning that game. And that got me really curious about high elo top laners, and it actually gave me a flashback to there's a high elo Renekton player on the NA server, 3-in-1 Warrior. I played against him, a while back, maybe a year ago, when he was smurfing, climbing, doing a challenge, and he made this play where he was level 4, he ganked our bot lane, got a double kill, went back top, didn't miss a wave, and it's things like this where I started to remember that, and it got me really curious about macro, tempo, and ironically, when I first joined the MLA, to your question earlier, my username was 10 CS a minute #Chovy. I mean, I was really I was
Mm.
only about my laning phase, didn't really care about the other lanes. I figured if I could win my lane hard enough, I'll just carry, and sort of opening up my vision to the other lanes and trying to understand how to win the game holistically. And really just being curious about roam timers. There were a few times where I roamed bot at level 3 and it worked out great. Other times I lost the game, and just being confident to lose some games and figure out more than just my laning phase, is really pivotal. And if you're able to kind of change your perspective from just your lane to the perspective of your other laners and how those matchups play out, I mean, it's really a game changer. That's, in my opinion, what really skyrocketed me to my first kind of sticking point from about Masters 100 to about 300.
Interesting. So in a way, what you're saying is that there was again another level of maybe not necessarily fighting, but the macro game that it kind of like a switch kind of flicked in your mind where it's like, okay, well, obviously I can win games the way I normally win games. That works, but maybe there's something else out there. Maybe there are other levels to this game that again I didn't really appreciate. And it sounds like to me, and again, I'm just kind of piecing this together as you're saying it. It kind of sounds like to me that you you had a mindset shift in terms of the amount of curiosity your fundamental approach and mentality towards the game sounds like it evolved, right? Because these are
Definitely.
things that if you're not a curious, open-minded individual and you're not putting your ego aside, you're just going to think you're not even going to pay attention to that. You'll be like, oh, yippee, I got my LP and that guy just got lucky or whatever the hell it is. Like you're just going to think it's noise. But the fact that you're attentive enough to be like, oh, interesting. Wow, I thought this game was over, and that guy did this, and you made that connection. Shows an evolution, I think, in your perspective of the game, your relationship with the game, and I think, as cliche as it sounds, curiosity really is it's the cornerstone of a successful League of Legends journey. Right, because the more curious and open-minded you are, the more attentive, the more information you're going to get. It kind of starts this cycle of just like learning that otherwise would have just been left untapped. Is that fair to say?
Oh, definitely. I agree with that. You know, you talk about get into the details, be curious, but it's not a mantra. To all your
Yeah.
viewers out there, it really does make a difference, and also it made the game fun. I had a blast learning. Like, all right, well, let me try and just ruin the enemy bot laner's game and see if it works. Sometimes, I lack some fundamentals, and I threw my own lane, and we lost LP. Sorry to that, my teammates, but it was a fun process. It was something new to learn. It wasn't always pretty, but it really is a game changer. So.
It's just expanding on that one little thing here that when you become very curious and open-minded about the game, it's funny because the game does naturally become more fun. Not because you're just randomly throwing shit out there. It's more that you see possibilities of winning games that you thought were not winnable, right? Because I think one of the main reasons people find League miserable is that they get behind or their teammates are losing, and in their mind they don't know how to win that game. It's like, oh, they're stronger. We're behind. We're gonna flip every dragon. We're gonna lose every fight, and then that's that. But in your mind, the more you start to realize about the game, you realize, oh, okay, well, maybe I don't have to fight that neutral objective. Maybe I can make this tempo play topside, or I can do this creative thing. And because there are possibilities at your disposal, you've got things that you can draw upon. It's not that it's not that you think you're going to win that game, but it's more that there is a possibility. There is a possibility that the game can turn on its head and that you could find a way to win. And it's that possibility that I think creates so much fun and excitement and the possibilities, I think unlocks that.
Yeah, and I think it's going back to that Ken and top lane player, it's that creativity. It's like, oh, there isn't just this mold I follow. I don't get, I'm not just going to focus on my lane, punish less CS, and I'll win with my gold advantage. It's you can really be creative and just blow up the game for the enemy team, punish a mistake, and flip the game on its head. It's exciting.
So, moving on, you said the next one here was shot calling for every person on the team. So you want to maybe
Yes.
elaborate on this one?
Yeah. So for that one, let me start with this. So if you're on an elo and you're stuck, like me when I was diamond when I started, if I'm not influencing the game and changing something, it's kind of an untenable position to think I'm going to climb, right? So if I'm kind of a passenger at will to my other teammates shot calling and they're at the same elo I'm at, I'm not going to improve. I'm just going to make decisions of that elo. And I think there's two big components to shot calling for your team. Number one, the feedback loop is really clear. If I make a big shot call, hey, let's do Baron, we lose a game on Baron, it's very easy to review that and make better decisions going forward. But number two is if you take ownership of, for example, the jungle tracking, if you put your 115, 120 Raptor ward, you know where the jungler is going and you see, roughly, okay, my enemy jungler is at Gromp. My bot lane shoving, they haven't warded yet. You should be pinging that. That if they die, that's on you. And in the past when I was, diamond and starting an MLA, I would get tilted. My bot lane's dying to a full clear gank. But that's on me. I had the knowledge. I could have influenced that outcome. So little things like that. Or for example, if an Atacon fight's coming and you see your top laner is topside with no TP, I'm typing to him. I'm saying, hey, screw the tier one, let it fall. Let's go to Atacon. Let's win the game. And if you aren't, it takes a little bit of courage or confidence. I actually mute my chat. I still type, so people could flame me. I don't care. I don't see it. But it takes a little bit of courage, of course, to be that shot caller. But it really does make a difference in your games, and you'll start to improve your macro very quickly because it's apparent when you make a bad call. It sometimes it's pretty painful, but you learn from those lessons.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And this is even me coming from a position of a player, not even a coach. Like this is, I think, one of the major differentiators to other players that I verse. I made a daily tidbit in the MLA about this whole idea of, okay, well, if I'm in the mid game, my I shouldn't stop tracking my counterpart. I should still be tracking what is my mid laner doing. Like I see vividly in coaching sessions every single day moments where they miss one moment where their counterpart gets shoved and moves in mid game, and they make a play on mid, and I'm like, well, if you ping that and your team doesn't die here and you get shoved off bot and the next neutral objective is coming up, this whole sequence is different. This whole game, this whole mid game is
Right.
completely different. That's just one small decision around communication, and I think again, it is a mindset shift. It's going from I only need to be responsible for me to how can I better contribute to the game holistically? How can I be a commander? How can I take control? And I love what you said at the very beginning of this, saying how if you just do what everyone else is doing in your ELO bracket, you're just going to stay at that ELO bracket. How simple is that? But it's not. It's just not executed upon. People think that if I just go out there, play on average, play a normal game of League of Legends, I'm just going to climb. And people genuinely think that and I think again that's where that ego seeps into play. They think that I deserve to climb just by me simply queuing up and playing and getting in repetitions. It's fundamentally an egotistical position in a way, isn't it?
Definitely.
Um, so yeah, I love that, and it's one of those topics that I think is so boring to the average person. Just shot call more and just communicate more, but it does make a difference because that's what league is. It's a series of small decisions. So yeah, I love that. Really, really awesome. So the
Definitely.
next
Yeah,
one,
actually,
oh, sorry, go
uh,
on.
just one more follow-up point on
Mm.
that, I forgot to mention was you actually did a review of Desperate Nasus when I used to be a big Kale player as well, and well, I played every champ, not to great skill, but you did a really nice review on that where Kale is not a champ you would think where you could be a commander, where you could influence the early, mid, pre-level 16 game. But he is one of the best shot callers probably in the U.S. server while playing a champ like Kale. And I found that review actually really inspiring as well, where he's commanding. He may not be able to move to every play because he doesn't have prio, but he is shot calling and he's influencing the game, which I think was inspiring. So
Yeah, and I think actually the more like the less impact your champion has, the more you need to take control in a way, right? Because you need to go
yeah,
above and beyond to prevent things from happening. Um, So the next point you had here was they're mortal. Okay. So this one is I love this one. Just quickly, I see time and time again people, whether they're trying to get to Master Tier for the first time as a Diamond player, or Emerald getting to Diamond, or even Master players trying to get to Grandmaster. There is this kind of point where people start getting so nervous. Like, how can I possibly beat these players? Or you start recognizing names. Oh, that guy, yeah, he's a streamer, and yada yada yada. So how did you tackle this? How did you overcome this kind of this narrative, I guess?
yeah, I think some of it is just mere exposure, like exposure therapy of just getting repetitions in. Because at first, I won't lie. I mean, when you go in, you see your first GM border. I'm shaking like a leaf. I'm nervous. It's like, oh man, this is a really good player. But eventually, you start to pick up on, hey, they messed up their flash, or they didn't punish my last hit. Like, what is this guy doing? And you start to realize that, oh, they make mistakes. You can punish them just like any other elo bracket. And the more you start to play in that elo, the more you start to see more and more of these mistakes. And more importantly, recognizing that they're making the mistake. It's no different than climbing a diamond or emerald. Once you start to pick up on and recognize mistakes that the enemy mid laner that you're playing against is making, that's a really good indication that you could probably climb. So I started to pick up on that, and slowly but surely, I got my confidence from recognizing those mistakes and started to play better, and actually ended up punishing those. And once the nervousness was out of there, I started to execute and be a little bit more confident.
Beautiful. Love that. And the next point here, you said first 8 minutes. Now, this is a big thing we talk a lot about, broke on the Broken by Concept podcast and my YouTube about the significance of the first 8 minutes. So, do you want to maybe share a little bit more about this one?
Definitely, yeah. So, when I think back on my journey up to Grandmaster, the way I really got to Masters was focus on my lane. 10 CS a minute Chovy, right? That I didn't care about anything else in the game. I had my blinders on. That really wasn't working to try and get above Masters. So, if you think back, to the Kennen player, right? Getting up to maybe about 300 LP or so was mostly just macro focus, and then I got stuck. And I realized that I really need to hone in on my laning because these players are starting to get pretty good and I can't get an advantage. Even though I can be a great macro shot caller, if I'm behind, if I'm not performing in my lane, I can't actually influence. I'm not in a position to win because League is inherently a snowball game as well. If I have more money in my pocket, I can probably win a team fight better, right? So from that, I didn't spend a whole lot of time reviewing mid game or late game unless there was something really obvious. But I really just honed in on those first 8 minutes. Am I punishing the last hits? Am I getting prio when I can? Am I moving to plays when I should? Or recognizing where maybe I could have made a play top and I didn't, or I tried to play for solo kill when I should have influenced bot lane. So really focusing on those first 8 minutes was impactful for me to build an advantage and start to use that newfound macro understanding to shot call and close out games and get myself up to GM.
So what do you think, a lot of people that you talk to in the MLA who are in master tier, what do you think is kind of holding them back in that regard? Like, you see a lot of these people in the Midland Academy Discord and stuff, and probably your other friends. What is it, more of a mindset thing? Do you think holds them back? Are they not getting in repetitions? What are the most common things you think you see from people in, preventing them from getting to Grandmaster specifically?
Yeah, I would say from my experience, kind of riffing on the blinders comment,
Mm,
I was reflecting on this topic and, thinking about photography. I'm not an expert in photography, but, there's this concept of aperture where you think of portrait mode on your phone versus landscape. When I think back to my journey when I was in low masters and hovering around that elo, my aperture, I had a lot of light coming in and I was only focused on the subject and the background was blurry. I was only focused on my lane opponent. The rest of the map was blurry. I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't make out what the jungler was doing. Is the support roaming? What the wave state was in bot lane? But I think what separates maybe like a low master player compared to a grandmaster player and above is they can change the aperture. They can change the amount of light, and they can focus on not only just subject in front, but the whole landscape. And I think that's really a key component because in past coachings I've gotten great feedback that says, hey, you're focusing on landing phase right now, but you really should be focused on prepping for your ubs or dragon, right? And I'm just so focused on my lane opponent and winning lane that I wasn't kind of grasping the holistic picture. And if I had to speculate, maybe even for GM Plus, obviously I haven't gone there, but I'd imagine, like, curious from your perspective, going with that analogy, that challenger players, they're not, they're probably using a digital camera that automatically can get the right aperture, right? So given any environment, they know the bot lane wave state, they know the jungler, they know the sports roaming, or even you can maybe even say this, where in my example, we're looking through our own lens from mid lane, maybe a
mm.
challenger player, right? They can understand all five perspectives. So I think I'm rambling, but to go back to the point, I think thinking about the game holistically, understanding what what is going on in all the different lanes and how can we actually win as a team, more so outside of your lane is probably what's holding people back.
Yeah, no, that actually completely aligns with my whole belief about the Master Plus climb and actually League of Legends holistically. Every single rank you go up, you're just trying to expand your view of the game, right? Going from just the 1v1 to the 2v2 to to the compositions holistically. The challenge I find working with people is not that they like. I could get into the review of someone and be like, okay, well here, you needed to be allocating your attention here, and this is why. Where I think people get beat down is because I think they really struggle to, again, it's the lack of open-mindedness, it's the lack of curiosity. It's just that they're, because their comfort zone is focusing on things related to them, whether it's their lane or their 1v1s and their 2v2s, it's just incredibly uncomfortable. It's not intuitive for them to direct attention to other things, such as like, oh, how is my like how volatile my top lane matchup? How does that have anything to do with me? It's just not something that I think a lot of people can really appreciate until they start to, like, again, your I think it all ties back to your canon experience. I think that was really it, right? That was the, you need to see it and feel it. Like, and I don't I think that takes ages. It does take a long time. That's why the Master Plus climb typically takes a very, very long time. Um, so yeah, I honestly, you speaking about it, maybe I need to make more content or figure out more metaphors or analogies to try and help people bridge that gap. How can I get people more excited about the game, more bigger picture, and how do I get them thinking about aspects outside of their own just champions identity and what their win conditions are, you know? So yeah,
Yeah,
it definitely gives me a lot to think about as a coach, actually, to be honest.
great.
So the next one here is VOD questions. So for those of you who are watching this who are not in the Midland Academy, we have something called VOD questions. So basically, it's like a channel where you can post a clip of anything that happens in your game and get it answered, right? So it's like a complement to coaching. If you don't want to get a whole VOD review, you can just be, all right, here, it might be a trade, it might be a team fight, it could be a mid-game macro deployment, and then you can get a coach to take a look at it. So I'm actually curious here for you. I would say, A, how frequently were you using the VOD question channel? B, what sort of questions were you asking?
Yeah, so I approach the VOD question channel in a pretty unorthodox way. I might be the only person who has done this really, but I would advocate for more people to do it. So what I did is I would look at questions that people would pose in their videos, and if it was a topic that I was struggling with, or I had concern about, no, concern is not the right word, but I was curious about, I would watch the clip and then I would actually wait for a coach to respond first, but I would go up to their question without the coach's response. So I would come up with my own answer of what I think went wrong or what the coach will say. And then I would wait for the coach's response, and that would be a clear indication of, do I have a fundamental understanding of this problem, which is most likely going to be something very complex, and we call it a puzzle to
Mm.
solve in my games. And it's sort of just having these puzzles and complexities on a silver platter, because really that's the value in playing games is, in repetition is, hey, out of those 30 minutes, there's this one segment in 1 minute where it was a key pivotal point that I either lost the game or won the game. And you kind of get those on a silver platter where you just get a huge sample size of things to test yourself on, really. And I think it did exponentially increase my climb, because I'm just solving so many puzzles at my fingertips, and basically having a challenger person be my benchmark. And if I'm off, then I can investigate further or ask them to explain. And I think it was very helpful.
Wow. Yeah, I've never heard of that before. I don't think anyone in the MLA, not that I know of, is doing that. So wow. I mean, props to you, dude. I mean, that's a lot of time, and I think that's a testament to your work ethic as well, Josh. So yeah, props to you, dude. That's amazing. I know that there's been a few people asking about is there a way to use all of the content in the VOD questions to create some sort of quiz thing
Oh, that'd be cool.
using AI? Maybe we'll figure that out, but it's yeah, I think there is definitely a resource there to unpack.
Yeah, maybe one thing that could be cool is you could have someone fill out like I don't know how Discord works, but like a
Mm.
drop down of like a topic at least. So it's something for maybe people to filter on of, oh, it's a wave state, or is this realm good, or some sort of high level topic, maybe at least as a
Yeah, you have like
intermediate
a filter, like
filter.
Rome. What's the one Rome? And then all the Rome things are together, or like yeah,
Yeah,
like death or team fight or whatever. Yeah, you just
yeah,
have those keywords. Yeah, I'm sure there is probably something there. I'll have to yeah look into that one. So now we're going to get to the fun stuff. Stage 4 issues. So you mentioned that you actually initially fluctuated all the way back down to Emerald. So do you want to maybe talk a little bit about the demotion to Emerald, maybe why that happened, and we'll just start there, I guess.
yeah, definitely. So like I had mentioned earlier, I would love to be the next Marcus Aurelius, the epitome of stoicism, but I was tilting. When I would lose games, I'd tilt. I would play worse. Even sometimes when I would miss a last hit, I would get tilted at myself. It was not it was not a fun experience like I'm having right now. Where as I started to, well, number one, my own gameplay was tilting me. I would make mistakes. I would play worse, and then that would be a kind of a snowball inertia effect, really, where I would continue to play worse and spam games. Didn't have a discipline in terms of playing in blocks, stopping after a certain amount of losses. It was, inertia was in full effect with my losses. I would keep losing and keep playing, which wasn't good. Other things in terms of framework that influenced me, for those of you out there that think that chat may not influence you at all, to me it did, and I didn't think it mattered that much, but it really did. So changing to chat mute all right when I go into the game, I think is really helpful because you still see pings, which matter, but you're also able to still type. I'm personally a fan of typing because I like to pace flash timers. I'm selfish. I love a jungle gank. If I tell them, hey, no flash, I might get the gank. Or just typing things like the Atacon example from earlier. So that helped me as a risk mitigant where, if someone's flaming me, I'm just not even going to see it. And if someone starts spam pinging me, I like using the deafen. I don't know if that's a best practice, but to me, it shows them like, hey, you can waste your energy pinging me, but I'm not going to see it. So hopefully it makes them actually focus on their own game. Or if anything, um, you know, it's wishful thinking maybe, but I think it doesn't hurt. So I actually use the deafen function and then I unmute pings so I can still play the game, but they obviously don't know that. So
So just elaborating a little bit on you would get tilted at your own mistakes. Now, this is a very common one, right? So I think the common theme is I'm playing below my level. At least that's the interpretation. I'm not playing to my level. This is uncharacteristic of me. Now I am losing games. I'm now further away from the rank that I was in the past. I maybe it was XYZ rank. Now I'm, 400, 500 LP lower than I was. So how did you I would say, A, how did you tackle that practically? What are tools and things that you used? And B, what are some maybe like different did you like change the way you framed it mentally? Was there any kind of cool mindset things or interesting kind of ways that you framed it mentally to help you deal with that?
yeah, I mean, I would say one thing that was affecting me was this idea of cognitive dissonance, right? Where I think I'm a master player and I'm playing an emerald and I'm better than these players. But the reality is, you're only as good as your current gameplay. I was at Emerald because I was playing like an Emerald player, and I think realizing that and kind of just addressing the elephant in the room that hey, I'm at this level because I'm playing that way, and that there's hope because what that means is that if my rank is a reflection of my current skill, it means that I can climb just as quickly as I fell. Because if I play like a master player, I will become a masters player. So I think just trying to rationalize that difference was really helpful for me. In terms of my gameplay that led to Emerald, I do think addressing or adding some risk mitigants did help a little bit, but really it's the outside of league that mattered a lot to me personally. Structure matters a lot. If I'm skipping my workout, if I'm not getting good sleep, if I'm really tired because I had a busy day at work and was on the phone the whole time on meetings, I probably shouldn't play a bunch of games that day because I'm going to play bad. I'm going to tell myself the voices, the devil on my shoulder is going to say, don't end on a loss, right? Get that LP back. Never good. Don't do it. And then I'm just digging myself a hole that I have to climb out of. And it's just not good. So for me personally, if I did get tilted from a loss, try to take a step away. I'm a swimmer, love to go to the pool. If I already went to the gym, for example, I have a rower in my office. If you think you're tilted, do some high intensity intervals on a rower. You will forget about the suffering that happened 20 minutes ago to your current suffering. So you can't ignore that. So, little things like that. But I do think having a bit of structure has helped me tremendously in terms of, having some stopping points to make sure that I stay on track.
I think again, like hearing everything you've just said there, you've got an immense amount of I'm not saying you had this the whole time, but introspection. I think you were quite introspective, and you were able to accept the tough reality. And that's the hard bit. It sounds obvious in hindsight. Oh, just accept that I am a Emerald player. Now I'm playing an Emerald, or accept that if I was playing at a Master Tier level, I would be in Master Tier. Like these are things that when you vocalize, you say it, it's so goddamn obvious. But when you're a heat of the moment and you're looking at your account and you're
Not
like,
easy.
I've just lost 15 of my last 20 games. I'm playing it. What the fuck is going on?
Right.
How do I get from, and so I think again, everything you're saying here makes so much sense, and it should make sense because everything in the rank system is logical, but it's the challenge is getting yourself into a state of mind where it's like, okay, I am falling trapped to these cognitive biases. I'm looking at my gameplay right now. I'm just dying to basic ganks. Let's just get my shit together, and I think that it kind of is that whole kind of pulling up, what's the term? It's kind of like pulling yourself up by the bootstraps or whatever it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, it's kind of just this whole mentality of just being like, all right, this is my situation. There's a reason I'm here. Let's figure it out together. And I think I mean, I hope that the MLA had some sort of contributing factor to helping you identify those problems. But yeah, I think it's a testament to your mentality, and I hope people listening to this can hopefully get a little bit of inspiration here. It's not rocket science. It isn't. It isn't. It is a hard game, but in terms of what you need to do process wise, it isn't that complicated. It's about staying consistent, getting your repetitions, not playing with your tilt when you're tilted, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so you spent a lot of time getting coached, being around people getting coached. What are some things that you always heard that you really struggled to internalize?
Yeah, I would probably go back to, that idea of playing for lane versus playing for the team.
Hmm,
That was a concept that I thought I understood when the coaches said it because it makes total sense. Like,
hmm.
okay, yeah, I'll make sure I shove my weight before grubs and I'll do that and like got it, like easy. But there's such a depth to that concept that I don't think I really even appreciated at the time. And it's really an important, like, I really do think that separates those, higher tier, players compared to maybe low masters where I was for a long time. It really matters a lot, and yeah, I think I just didn't appreciate the depth of the concept. I was like, "All right, yeah, I'll shove and I'll move, and I did my job." But there's so much to it. It's such a which is the fun part of league, right? But yeah, I'll stop
No,
rambling on that.
I love that you say that because think about what actually entails getting to a neutral objective on time. You have to be aware of the timers in the first place. You have to have the mental capacity to do that. You have to plan out your reset, right? Make sure you're getting out waves and planning out your reset. You need to make sure that you are aware of where your jungler is and what your jungler is doing. And then you even need to have the foresight to being like, well, is this fight even winnable in the first place? You need to be able to
Right.
read the compositions and be like, well, based on what we got here, maybe I should actually just ping back and say no. Or maybe it's in a scenario where it's on a knife's edge. It's like, okay, maybe we can win it, but I need to position very conservatively. You know what I mean? Sometimes you cannot fully
Right.
commit to the river. So there's so much that goes into that that is the beauty of League of Legends. It's yeah, sure, you've got these principles, you've got these frameworks, but the execution of that on the mental stack and the execution of that with having four other players on your team and they're all of them having their own agendas and being adapt to the chaos. And what happens if you're planning a neutral objective and then randomly your jungler goes the other side of the map? It's these sorts of shit that goes on that you're going to have to wrestle. And I think that it's it's such a humbling thing because you hear all the time. I mean, people think that league is you need all this crazy sophisticated macro to climb in the rank system. You don't. You don't really. I mean, later on, sure, we can get to that. But even getting to Master Tier and Grandmaster, as long as you're following that structure and following those principles, that alone is going to be all the complexity you need. The complexity is in the execution. The complexity is not in the actual concept itself. And I always say, League is a game that's every individual thing is not complex. League's not a very complex game, is it? Like it's not super. The concepts are not that hard to wrap your head around. Again, in the heat of the moment, that's where the complexity really comes into play. It's the execution. So I absolutely love that.
Yeah, and I think.
Um,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
sorry, go
Go ahead.
on. No, you go
Oh,
on, man.
yeah, I was just going to say, on a similar theme, kind of going back to the curious piece. Part of I think what's holding some people back in that elo bracket is, they aren't getting curious about like what are the possibilities,
Yeah.
because that concept of all right, playing for lane or playing for my team, there's a lot of depth to that. But one thing I noticed is that when I started to play maybe against like a Masters 100 player, there'll be times where hey, I made a mistake and they have tempo. I'm typing in all caps. Bot lane, Ari's roaming, Ari MIA, I can't match. I'm spam pinging. I'm praying that she doesn't get a double kill, and then she just doesn't show up. There's little things like this where if you have the blinders on, like I did with that, the portrait mode aperture, right? The landscape is blurred. I only see my lane opponent. You're not even considering plays on the map. You kind of don't know what you don't know in terms of what
Mm.
you're missing out on. So I think that's another similar theme, but another concept where be curious about how can I influence the game outside of my lane.
Mm. Now, you've been in Emerald, Diamond, Master for, that whole range for quite a long time. And, what do you think keeps the average let's talk specifically about Diamond for a second. What do you think keeps the average Diamond player in Diamond and prevents them from reaching Master tier?
Yeah, I would say I would probably split up probably like D4 to D2. I think it's kind of its own bracket, and maybe D2 and D1 are maybe pretty similar. In terms of D4 to D2, I think you're starting to have some pretty good champ mastery, but I think you're making some fundamental mistakes. And in terms of Diamond Elo in general, I would say support roam timers. I remember I was dying all the time to support roams, and I wasn't even. I was always surprised. It felt like I was surprised by support roams, and I was surprised by jungle ganks. And similar theme to before, of course, I was not considering anything outside of my lane in terms of creative macro. So I think really you're building up the mental stack of laning. You're still making some mistakes. You have some pretty good champ mastery, but you you don't have that foundational knowledge really to kind of think about the broader picture. You're not FKing bot lane to see if Janna is there or not, or considering that, oh, they just crashed, like Janna could open up mid. She might not just run bot lane. So some of these things, I know when I was Diamond, I really wasn't considering the bigger picture, and I got punished for it when I did face those players.
So how did you what if there's a diamond player watching this, what are some ways that they could maybe review their games, or any do you have any tips for how they could maybe review these scenarios or improve upon these skills?
Yeah, like when I think back to when I was dying to a lot of jungle ganks, this was in my Mbessa era.
Mm.
Um, I was in particular, I got some great advice that you don't know what you're missing out on when you're dying. So there was a time for me where I just played conservatively. It wasn't something where I'm shooting for the moon. I'm trying to get challenger right now. I'm playing to not die and understand what it feels like to have high CS, be a resourceful, have good items, and not be gray screened. And that was really helpful for me. Now, in terms of reviews, when you get punished, really take note of that, because you might have the inclination, especially going back to when I first joined MLA, of, oh man, my support, I gave them counter pick. How does this happen? Why am I getting ganked? Like, my team sucks. You should really take that as an opportunity, because there's a concept. I'm going to butcher the quote. I actually think it came from you or AJ, but you know, being aggressive or conservative isn't just sort of like a whimsical choice. There's a right answer at the right time. There's an optimal choice. You can punish your laner when you see the support and the jungler's not there. But if you're all inning when Janna's not on the map, you don't know where the jungler is, you're not being aggressive, you're just trolling. So, like when you get punished for those mistakes, I mean, really take note of that, because those are great learnings.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, well said. And then lastly here, big one here. What are some of the traps that you fell into? I think a lot of people, we all fall into traps at one point or another in our journey, whether it be, again, you fall into a hole with a mental block about a particular champion, or traps in terms of, again, anchoring to past ranks, or traps in terms of comparing yourself to others. Were there any kind of traps that you fell into that really cost you quite a lot of LP?
Yeah, I mean, the mental piece and building that framework, I think, was instrumental in terms of, getting off the computer. If I'm not, actually, let me phrase it this way, because we haven't talked about this.
Mm.
If you're not excited to play the game, you have to be really honest with yourself. You are not going to play well. At least for me personally, I'm a passionate person. I'm really competitive. I want to win. But if it feels like a chore to queue up, you just lost the game, you want to get your LP back secretly. If you're honest with yourself, you will not play well, and you will probably lose a lot of LP. I wasted so many games coming back up to my non-tilted MMR, right, to get back to my starting point, and then I'm starting from scratch. So really be honest with yourself. If you didn't get great sleep, if you didn't get your workout in, if you don't feel excited and fresh and ready to, kind of express your best self, you really aren't going to be the player you want to be, and you're really going to hinder your progress.
Yeah, I love that. Well said. I mean, I fully attest to that. At the end of the day, if you're not having fun and you're feeling like it's like a second job, you're not in the right mental state, it doesn't really matter how good your learning objectives are. It doesn't matter how good your review process is. It doesn't matter how much champion mastery you even have on that champion. You're just not going to be engaged. And I think that's such a great, again, it's another one of those cliches that just rings true. It just absolutely rings true, because at the end of the day, without fun, you're not engaged. If you're not engaged, you're not going to be using your lull states properly. If you're not using your lull states, everything falls apart essentially.
Yeah, and oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, you go on, man.
Yeah, and another topic for me that not necessarily a hindrance, but I kind of took the scenic route. It's definitely not the most optimal way to climb. Is playing a lot of champions. Going back to that champ mastery point, I had struggled with the identity of Elcause. it was a little discouraging to me that, for example, in NA, it's like there's no Vel'Koz mid players. Even Azep, he went to bot lane mostly. I'm sure he could perform well in GM, don't get me wrong, in mid lane, but um, that made me a little bit discouraged. And I would reach out to people saying, "Hey, I used to play Syndra. I'm 70% win rate on Syndra, 10 games. Should I just one trick Syndra and that's my blind pick?" And I always had these sort of champ identity crises where, it's the champion holding me back. Like if I just switched up my champ pool, I'd climb to 300 LP. You don't need, you really don't need to waste your time doing that. I know a lot of people, may view Vel'Koz as kind of like a useless mid lane champion, which arguably is true if you're facing Akshan, but, um, yeah, but, but you really can play any champion, I would argue, at least a GM. So, if that's something that is your goal, if you really love Vel'Koz or some weird pick that you find really fun, use that as your fuel because, going back to our earlier point, if you are excited to queue up the game, you will be curious. And that's what happened to me where I really enjoyed reviewing my laning phase. It's really fun to hit my Qs, shepherd someone into my WE combo and one shot them. I love that. It's super fun. And, you can really make any champion work. It's not your champ pool that's holding you back. If you really are curious and want to get into the details, you can really play any champion. If you want to get to Masters, play the champion you enjoy and you can get there. So hopefully that's helpful to people.
Yeah, I love that, man. And yeah, you did it with Vel'Koz. A lot of people struggle to do it. They whenever they start to see that the champion's not in the meta or, low on some tier list that they see somewhere, and they might have no chance. And again, you are living proof that it doesn't matter how good or bad your champion is objectively in a meta, that you can get to an incredibly high rank and achieve something amazing. So, that's really all the questions for me. Were there any kind of final comments and things that, we felt we maybe left out here today?
No, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, just want to give a shout out. I've been a long time viewer back in the Mogu Baby Nocturne middays. Just really appreciate all of the MLA community and the feedback I've gotten that help get me to this point. If anyone's on the fence, I'd obviously highly recommend it. So appreciate the time.
Awesome. And thank you for your time, Josh, and thank you for sharing all that wisdom. Hopefully you guys got a gem or two from this one. Otherwise, we'll see you for another video soon. Cheers.